I'm a socialist, and so, part of my own set of politics is that elections don't bring fundamental change. You actually need a revolution for that. But elections do give us a bit of a calendar, because most people don't spontaneously decide that we need a revolution. So for most people, elections are the main form of politics in which they engage. So my comments are about the next 4 years, although I hope it's less. And I'm going to focus on Quebec Solidaire because it's the political party of the left and of social movements in Quebec. So essentially what I'm going to talk about is what I think Quebec Solidaire should focus on. And it also, I just want to add in here that definitely there has been a tendency inside Quebec Solidaire, that tension that Nora mentioned between electoralism and movements. And you know, the way that we talk about Quebec Solidaire is that it's a party of the ballot box and of the street. And there's always going to be a natural tension between those things. But actually you also need both, because they reinforce each other, and you can't, until we get rid of a system where the semblance of democracy we have as elections, you're not getting rid of it without social movements. And because of what I said about it being the reflection of politics for most people, it's just always going to be there. And the other thing is that we've actually gone through 8 years where we've had 4 elections. And so it's kind of hard not to think about elections when you've got successive minority governments or a weak government or whatever. And so you're constantly in the process of trying to catch up with the money that you've already spent on the last election. At the same time, trying to be honest to your roots as a party of the street as well, and find ways to engage in the social struggles that are going on in meaningful ways. I think if I'm not mistaken, there were 400,000 people that abandoned the PQ in the election. Of those 40,000, this is very oversimplified, 60,000, we got 60,000 additional votes for Quebec Solidaire. So let's assume that all of them came from the PQ. It's probably not true, but let's just assume that. So where did the other 340,000 votes go? What happened to all those 340,000 people that used to vote PQ? So some of them obviously voted for the other political parties, but not all of them. So the question is, how are we going to go find those people? So that's one of the things that Quebec Solidaire needs to think about over the next 4 years. The second thing is that Quebec Solidaire needs to engage in actual movement building. And I think Quebec Solidaire is a party that can engage in movement building. So what Nora said about Quebec Solidaire not being like the NDP, it's hard for me to imagine that the NDP could be a force for building movements. It's not completely unimaginable, but it's hard. Quebec Solidaire was formed as a party explicitly of the social movements. And it's been a discussion in the party since its founding, and actually since before its founding. In its predecessor organizations, about how to do that. How does a political party build a social movement without appearing to be trying to co-opt it, or without stepping on its toes, or without kind of taking it over? Because we now have 14,000 members. And so there's actually a real danger that we could be perceived if we flooded X social movement, it would probably freak people out. So we need to think through how to do that. From my perspective, I would agree with Benoit that the primary places where there is work to be done among the social movements in Quebec are labor and climate justice. I think there's already obviously a labor movement. There's already obviously a movement for climate justice. But labor's on the defensive in Quebec just as much as it is on the defensive outside Quebec. It's true that there was a big mobilization for the throne speech. I think that Quebec unions are really good at getting people onto buses. Actually, that's true of unions across the country. So it's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a fight back against austerity. And so, and it is a situation of defensive battles. And overall, generally speaking, the unions are just as weak in Quebec as they are elsewhere. And what that means is that there's I think it's called Socialist.Ca. There's a network of union activists that are fighting to make the labor movement in Quebec a fighting movement against austerity. And it's just nascent and forming and stuff. There's going to be some meetings coming up, and Quebec Solidaire should be there and intervene. And climate justice, there's been a consistent level of mobilization, but also there was a huge demonstration in 2012 on Earth Day of 600,000 people, but Earth Day of 2013, but Earth Day this year was pretty tiny. It was only a few thousand, I think. Was it? Whatever. Anyway, the one that happened during the strike was huge, enormous, amazing, and it's like, so there has been a level of struggle, but it's kind of uneven, and it is somewhat isolated. So I'm just going to say some things that I think that Quebec Solidaire needs to think about over the next 4 years. We need to link to labor, but not necessarily organized labor. I don't think that it's necessarily about getting endorsements from unions. I don't think it's necessarily about getting union leaders to run as candidates. I'm not saying those would be bad things, but I think to really get an organic connection to struggle, we need to focus where the struggle in the labor movement needs to be, which is in the rank and file and the grassroots. We need to highlight that thing that I mentioned, offensive syndical, and it's not about just going to demos with placards. Quebec Solidaire has to move beyond just going to Earth Day with placards, although actually at the Earth Day demonstration we had a newspaper where we actually had something to hand out that was some like full-on analysis that we could share with people to try to indicate that we weren't just there symbolically, that we're actually engaging in the conversations that people are having in that movement, and we have a position on them. There's a formation inside Quebec Solidaire, actually both inside and outside, called the Réseau Éco-Socialiste. We still don't really know what potential that organization has, but it basically groups people inside Quebec Solidaire and outside it along the lines of climate justice and anti-capitalism, and also has a view towards maintaining Quebec Solidaire as a non-electoralist force. And I think that's going to be an important site for people like us to engage. And I just want to end by saying that it's absolutely essential, as several others have already mentioned, that we need to talk to people beyond our own ranks. Because you know, you do that a bit in elections, but you do it in a sort of a random way, right? And actually there's something to that. I mean, we need to use that same method that we use in elections to go and talk to people in their neighborhoods, in their houses, in their communities. The example of the Canada Post campaign keeps coming up. I'm not sure if there's anything happening actually in Quebec on the Canada Post campaign. I know the posties in Quebec are very mobilized, but I don't know if they're doing the neighborhood work. They are, okay. And then there's also the climate justice thing. So I think probably key is going to be to actually go door to door and find people that we have, like, did you vote for Quebec Solidaire? Okay, so here, you want to join? You know, here's a petition against the pipelines, come out to the demo, like start having conversations with people beyond just during elections. And these are ideas that I've been talking to Benoit about a lot, actually, and others in Quebec Solidaire. The final thing that I'm going to say is that the national question is crucial, and Quebec Solidaire needs to campaign on it, because the collapse of the PQ, as Benoit mentioned, has opened up a space for discussion, and I think Quebec Solidaire has the strategy that can work. There are some really detailed debates going on about how exactly we would see that unfolding, and I won't get into the details now, but if you're interested in more detail about any of this, there's a panel tomorrow on left regroupment where we're probably going to get into some of the more nuts and bolts kind of stuff a little bit more. And to conclude, I want to echo that there's no Quebec people who live in Quebec are not genetically different from people who live anywhere else. There's not, obviously Quebec has a different history, but there's nothing special about how the Quebec Solidaire didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the result of a long process of steps and relationships between politics and social movements. Same thing with the student strike. A General Assembly doesn't equal a strike, as Mathieu very well described. It takes work, and the work that, we all know it takes work, and we just have to do it. Thanks.